It doesn't matter what you do in life. You can be an engineer, military, garbage collector, plumber. It doesn't matter. If you can learn to write and speak well and be a good whatever, you'll rise up in that profession.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am back with Andrew Pudewa, and we are talking about language arts this week. This has been a fun conversation. I love this topic. This is part of our Homeschooling Every Subject series that we are in. And so if you missed Monday's episode and yesterday's episode, go back and listen to those. And Andrew just brings so much encouragement. It's so much fun chatting with you.
I hope so.
Well, you know, you are the IEW man. So there was no one else better that I could even think of to talk about this topic than Andrew. And so if you missed last week, we talked about music and how that even relates to language arts and learning in every aspect. And so that was just a fascinating conversation as well. So if you missed that, go back and listen to that 3-part episode as well. But we're going to get back into talking about language arts today. Before we do, though, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. If you're looking for great, solid biblical worldview curriculum for your kids, check them out at bjupresshomeschool.com. And they've got something for everyone, and they will help you. If you don't know what you need, call up one of their consultants, and they'll talk with you and help you figure out what's best for your family. bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, Andrew, welcome back. This has been such a fun conversation, and I want to talk. We've talked about reading, we've talked about writing, we've talked about grammar, and spelling. We didn't talk about vocabulary. Let's talk about that for just a minute, because I want to talk today a lot about speaking, public speaking, and just our kids learning how to speak well. But let's talk for just a second about vocabulary. And the importance of that. And I know there's lots of vocabulary, curriculum out there, lots of different ways to teach vocabulary. I remember when Brooklyn was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and we were under an umbrella school because we were in California. And so I had to do a report card for her. And on the report card, there was a little line that said vocabulary. And I thought, well, I'm not using a vocabulary curriculum, so I guess I can't put a grade for that. And so I just put a, an A or a 0 or something like that. And the lady who was overseeing that umbrella school, I met with her, and she said, well, why didn't you put anything for vocabulary? And I said, well, I don't have a vocabulary curriculum. And she said, do you speak to her each day?
Yeah.
And I said, yes. And she said, she's learning vocabulary. And it was one of those like, phew, okay, I can check that one off. And I've never used an official vocabulary curriculum, but surprisingly, my girls know a whole lot about vocabulary, and they know the meanings of words. Yeah. So what is your take on vocabulary? Is it necessary to have a curriculum for vocabulary? What's the best way to teach it?
Well, obviously the best way to teach it is to maintain a higher level of vocabulary in the environment.
Right.
So, speak to your children using the best vocabulary you can. And
yes.
I think that's what you probably have done,
right.
And Garrett too. That would be supplemented by reading. So when you read to children, whether they're 4 years old listening to picture books with words that they might not understand, like steam engine or something, there's a picture, they put the 2 and 2 together. We mentioned earlier in a previous episode the word sleigh. How would you know that? You'd have to acquire it somehow in order to read it. So that would be kind of the passive vocabulary development. A more active vocabulary development, or a way to move words from a passive, i.e., I kind of know that word, to I could use this word, would be to memorize and recite language that contains better vocabulary. This would be poetry, scripture. As kids get a little bit older, maybe excerpts of famous speeches. But it's very interesting when you memorize a poem, and poems by their nature often use words you don't encounter in daily life. Poets have to find the word that fits the rhythm and the rhyme scheme and all that. So you generally will get a broader range of poetry, a broader range of vocabulary in poetry. And by memorizing and reciting that, you then become very confident in using those words.
Right.
So that's something I'm also, very, very much recommending that everyone do poetry memorization with children of all ages.
Right.
They can start as young as 5 or 6, and you can keep going your whole life.
Right.
Obviously, memorizing scripture has spiritual as well as linguistic advantages.
Mm-hmm.
But that, I think, would be the most important thing. And then thirdly, I would say your best vocabulary program is going to be studying Latin.
Okay.
So over 60% of all English words of 3 syllables or more are derived from Latin roots.
Right.
And what's really fun is you learn Latin and you may learn a word and realize you already knew it,
right.
but now you're getting a greater insight into the meaning of that word. I'll give you an example. How would you define the word diligent? What does it mean to you?
Hardworking, being concentrating on a specific task or subject.
Okay.
How would you define diligent?
Being perseverant. So what's really interesting is that word diligent is derived from the Latin verb diligo, which means to love. It's one of the Latin words that would translate to love. So why are we diligent? Because we love. See, there you've got a wedding sermon right there. But you get all these little insights. So Latin is really the best way to expand and solidify a vocabulary. And then you could supplement that probably with Greek roots.
Okay.
Studying Greek is a little more than most people can bite off. Or you could just get a Greek and Latin word roots program. There are lots of them that are available.
Yeah.
We had English from the Roots Up that's been around in the homeschool world for a long, long time.
Okay.
I don't know if BJU publishes something along those lines. Another one is a card game called Rummy Roots. And so rather than making, runs and sets, you're matching up words by root or suffix or prefix.
Oh, wow.
So that's a fun way to do it. So I think if you do enough of those 3 things, keep a high level of vocabulary coming in through the ear, memorizing more sophisticated language than you're going to just use on a daily basis talking to people, and then supplement that with Greek and Latin roots, you're going to develop a vocabulary in the best way possible. And then in our theme-based writing lesson books, we do bring in 4 vocabulary words per lesson and have little cards so the kids can practice that. And then the goal is use one of these words in your composition.
Right.
So again, moving it from passive, I kind of know that word, into, I can write that word in a sentence.
Right. Good stuff. As we're talking about Latin, what is so for the parent who's like, I don't know how to teach Latin, because you keep talking about Latin and there's so much benefit obviously in learning Latin. How do you just start? Like, is it okay to just learn the very basics of, I don't know that you could even say basics. I mean, Latin is not a very basic. There
are basics. There are very basic things that you can learn right along with your kids.
So how do you do that?
Well,
give some advice on that.
When we moved to Oklahoma, things changed a lot.
Yeah.
And so my 3 youngest children did not have the same opportunity as a couple of the older ones, which is to take Latin from a Latin teacher who was a high school Latin teacher who is now teaching classes for homeschool kids where we were living in California. So now there's no Latin teacher.
Right.
So they're either going to not get it or someone's going to have to do it.
Right.
The only one around was me, but I didn't know it.
Right.
But I can learn.
Yeah.
Right? We can all learn.
So did you teach Latin here in Oklahoma?
I did.
Oh, okay.
For 6 years.
Yeah. You said you had taught it, but I didn't realize it was here.
I got a class of kids, my children and their friends, basically. And I just started out with first form Latin from Memoria Press. And I would just study and do the worksheets and listen to the audio that came with the thing. I bought it.
Yeah.
And I just learned, and then I would explain, and then I would learn the next part and I would explain. I'd try to stay a few lessons ahead was the best I could do. Yeah. And the kids would ask me a question. I'd say, well, I don't know. So I will get the answer and let you know. So I would contact one of my friends who actually works for Memoria Press and knows Latin really well and ask him, and he'd give me an answer. I would give it back. And I continued this. I taught first form, second form, third form, fourth form, Henley 1, and the Bible, part of the Latina, Biblical Latina, whatever the title of that thing is, for 6 years. And I learned more grammar than I ever knew. I got like X-ray vision into my own language. So you can do this.
Yes.
You can learn along with your kids. There's also a wonderful video course. I didn't use it because I wanted to teach.
Right.
So I used the textbook, and workbook approach. Also, Classical Academic Press has Latin for Children.
Yeah.
And that's a great course, a little more cutesy with, a little more fun looking. So there's lots of opportunities available. And it's actually easier to do it than, say, teaching another language you don't know, but you have to pretend like you do to talk. Because when you're teaching Latin, you don't really have to spend a lot of time trying to just talk to each other.
Right.
That's not why you do it.
Right.
You do it more to learn the vocabulary, the structure of the language, the grammar. It's like X-ray vision into language itself.
Yeah.
So that's why I, encourage people, give it a shot.
Yeah.
And I've talked to lots of moms who did the same thing.
Yeah.
Started off and, hey, I got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old and me.
Right.
And we're all just going to start doing Latin together. And rather than you have to do this while I do something else, no, we have to all learn this together.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not something you want to just hand off to your kids and be like, here you go. Best of luck to you.
Yeah. So that's, that I would encourage. But again, if you aren't up for that, you can get a, Latin and Greek word roots study program, or even a workbook, a vocabulary workbook. But that would be, for me, kind of the least valuable, least effective, and last option.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll try to put some of those links in the show notes for our listeners so they can find some of them. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. Have you tried CTC Math yet with your child? Here's a testimonial from another happy homeschool mom. Amber said, "I'm absolutely thrilled with CTC Math. It's a rare find that I've used with my children for more than 5 years now. I have 6 children using CTC Math, and each child has found it easy to navigate and very applicable. Thank you so much for all that you are doing in providing quality math lessons for my children." If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. That's ctcmath.com. Join Apologia for the Homeschool Bootcamp, a free video series that provides practical guidance and wisdom from experienced homeschool parents. You'll discover how to equip your family for academic, social, and spiritual success. Plus, you'll discover how to build deeper and stronger family relationships. Homeschool Bootcamp covers how to break free from the public school mindset, daily planning, supporting students with learning challenges, homeschooling as a working parent, navigating the high school years, and much more. Find this incredible free homeschool resource at apologia.com/bootcamp. We are back with Andrew. I just want to ask about this really quickly, and then I want to move on. We just have a few minutes left. I want to talk about speaking, but I want to talk really quickly about penmanship and the importance of penmanship and cursive writing. And I was talking about cursive with Lacey the other day, and she, most kids I feel like today don't know cursive, and a lot of kids don't know how to read cursive because it's just becoming a very lost art.
I saw a little cartoon with 2 old ladies talking.
Yeah.
And the caption was, "Pretty soon cursive is going to be our secret code."
Right.
Because if you don't learn to write it, you can't read it.
Right. Exactly.
There's a big debate in the world about is it worth the time?
Mm-hmm.
Is it valuable? And I have an opinion, but I do respect other opinions in this regard.
Yeah.
One argument is cursive is not necessary. In fact, pretty soon writing on paper may not even be necessary. We just talk to machines and they translate it into language and all that.
Yeah.
There is science to support the value of writing on paper in that it does something for the brain that you don't get any other way.
Right.
You use more of your brain when you're writing on paper than when you're typing.
Sure.
And use even more of your brain if you're writing in paper in cursive than if you're writing on paper printing or typing. And the part of your brain that's activated when you're using cursive on paper is the artistic intuitive area of the brain. So your language executive dominant hemisphere, right brain or left brain stuff, right? What they call left brain is the mechanics of words, but it's that intuitive right brain artistic part that comes into action. You can actually observe this on fMRI scans when people are writing on paper.
Yeah.
So there is a good argument to be made that you would write more beautifully, more artistically, more eloquently by writing on paper than typing. And, you know, it is interesting to note that both J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, who a lot of homeschool families love, they wrote everything they wrote on paper, even though typewriters, you know, existed during their lives and even before then. In fact, C.S. Lewis not only wrote everything on paper, he wrote everything with a fountain pen.
Oh, wow.
Not
I didn't know that.
Any old fountain pen, a dip in the inkwell fountain pen. And so I think there's a good argument to be made that writing on paper is a valuable skill. I don't know any parents who would want their kids to grow up and not be able to write on paper.
Right.
So even though at our age we type almost everything, it's still nice to be able to write on paper.
Yeah.
And cursive has, you know, it's got, I think, artistic benefits as well as neurological benefits. And children develop a sense of pride in their handwriting.
Yeah.
Here's little known trivia is it wasn't until around the beginning of the 1900s that children didn't learn cursive first. So all up until that time, go back to the mid 1800s, everybody learned cursive first. That was primary. Then if you wanted to learn to print, you could learn calligraphy, you could learn printing style. It was when typewriters became ubiquitous in the early 1900s, someone said, oh, we better teach children to print first. They won't be able to read type, which is dumb because they've been reading even while learning cursive first. Another thing that's interesting is that if you watch young children use utensils on paper around 3, 4, when they first start doing this, they will make circles and curves more easily than they make straight lines. So the other thing is cursive is really helpful for dyslexic kids because the letters are more different. And there's a much different kinesthetic action in making them. So if you think you got a, you know, dyslexic kid and you're going to make a B or a D and you're going to do this by making a stick and a ball, you're going to be wrong all the time. Murphy's Law of Dyslexia. However, if you think about making a B in cursive writing or making a D in cursive writing,
they're totally
it's
different.
A completely different kinesthetic feeling. So it's very hard to reverse cursive letters the way it is easier for kids to reverse them in printing. So there's some thoughts there.
Yeah, it is. It's, I mean, at least for myself, it's faster to cursive. I write everything in cursive. I have to think more about writing in print than I do in cursive. And it's just so much faster to just.
And I quit in middle school when they let you. And then I picked it up again at 50 years old.
Oh, wow.
And retrained myself to do cursive. And I discovered, yes, it is faster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But it takes you, you know, several months to retrain yourself to get to that point.
Yes.
Which is one reason why cursive first makes sense, because if you teach a kid to print and then around 3rd grade or 4th grade, you say, now you have to learn cursive, they're going retrograde in terms of speed and ease. Whereas if you just start cursive and keep going the whole way, you don't have that, now I have to slow down problem. But.
Wow. So it will be very interesting to see where our society goes in regards to writing, because again, I mean, I think there will be a lot of people who don't know how to read cursive, you know, in the years to come, because it's just not as commonly used.
But people still like the idea of beautiful writing.
Oh, I love it.
Hopefully.
So I agree. Okay. Well, we have a few minutes left and I really want to talk about speaking. And I know this is something that you are really passionate about, is even teaching kids the art of public speaking. You hear that that's one of the greatest fears, if not the greatest fear that humans have, is the fear of public speaking. Talk about the importance of teaching our kids to speak well and to speak confidently and how we can do that with them.
Yeah. So I think we all kind of recognize the value
Right.
of a person who can speak in front of a group and not stumble around,
Mm-hmm.
be articulate, even eloquent.
Right.
Those people tend to rise up
Mhm.
in positions of influence and leadership. In fact, as a side point, I meet boys
Mhm.
often who will, 13-year-old boy say something like, why do I have to learn to write? I'm not going to do this. I'm going
Right.
to be an engineer. Or I'm
Right.
going to, I always say, it doesn't matter what you do in life. You can be an engineer, military, garbage collector, plumber. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter. If you can learn to write and speak well
Mhm.
and be a good whatever,
Yeah.
you'll rise up in that profession.
Yeah.
Right? The best engineer stays an engineer because that's what he's good at.
Right.
But the good engineer who can communicate engineering ideas well
Mhm.
will rise up in position of influence. And we want, I think we all understand that, we want to prepare our children as best as possible for God to use them
Mhm.
in a, leadership capacity, whatever they're called to,
Right.
to speak and write and communicate the truth about
Yeah.
whatever it is, wherever
Right.
they are. So
Yeah.
that's my argument there. So what are the steps? Well, one step is memorizing and reciting.
Mhm.
So memorize a poem, stand up in front of people, recite it.
Mhm.
You may, under that pressure, forget something.
Mhm.
So what does that teach you? Have to practice more,
Mhm.
have to be better prepared. Okay, so practice that poem, try a few times, now go and do it again. Now you have more confidence, more polish. People are impressed. And so that's the first step. And you can start doing this with very young children. In fact, I recommend
Yeah.
that as a violin teacher,
Mhm.
I will assure you it is easier to get an 8-year-old kid to stand up and play a violin recital for the first time
Mhm.
than to get a 15-year-old kid
Oh, yeah.
or an adult to stand up and play a violin recital for the first time.
Right.
So capitalize on the youth. Another thing that fits very well is opportunities for drama, right?
Mm,
Kids
mhm.
love to be in plays.
Right.
And so if you can create a little drama group or even let them make their own play at home and then, memorize lines, and you have to practice and memorize and practice and memorize. And then
Yeah.
you get on stage and you do that. That builds confidence. That's
Yeah.
a rhetorical skill. Then the next step would be maybe going into a situation where you would write a speech
Mhm.
about something you care about,
Right.
something that's meaningful to you. You may have to do a little research, but you write the speech, you memorize it,
Mhm.
and then recite it in front of whoever.
Right.
And this is one thing that the homeschool speech and debate world is very good at.
Mhm.
So there's the two leagues, ncfca.org,
Yeah.
and then STOA, STOA, is
Okay.
another homeschool debate league. And most of my kids have been involved in this during their childhood. And it's just phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
The rhetorical confidence that
Oh, yeah.
these speech and debate kids have.
Right.
And so, write a speech, persuasive speech, expository speech, humorous speech, whatever, and memorize it and deliver it.
Mhm.
And then you kind of get to the end, which would be limited prep or something like impromptu.
Mhm.
So here's a quote. You've got 2 minutes to plan. Now you can give a 5-minute speech on that quote.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing
Oh,
to
yeah.
do.
Most adults can't do that.
No. And when you watch kids who've practiced this,
Yeah.
you're pretty much, amazed. In
Right.
fact, I would say to all of your listeners, if anyone is feeling a little bit of lack of hope for the future of the country and the
Yeah.
world, which happens to me pretty much every day,
Yeah.
the best cure is go to a homeschool speech and debate
Yeah.
tournament. Even if you have to drive or fly, it's worth it just to see the potential of what these kids can do
Yeah.
when they apply themselves
Right.
seriously. And you may be motivated to get involved or start your own club
Yeah.
and do that. The other thing that I am trying to encourage people is to be as adults,
Mhm.
is to be a little bit more sensitive to the way that we use language. It is very common to speak to a person, even as old as I am,
Mhm.
right? But certainly a
Yeah.
millennial age person,
Yeah.
the young moms I meet, who will say the word like
Mhm.
so frequently in a conversation, and they don't know they're doing this.
Right.
Now, we've always had verbal crutches. Once upon a time, it was the pregnant pause. If you didn't know what to say, you'd wait until you could say it.
Right.
Then there was the and that was kind of what I grew up with. The next one was, and my wife will often start a conversation saying, I don't know. What's that about? But that was my generation's verbal crutch, was the, this generation's verbal crutch is like. And I think it's almost a representation of their understanding of the universe.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, you could wait, think it through, and move on. Then that was awkward. So you had to put some sound to bridge it over because people became uncomfortable with silence. Then the generate. We actually believe that you could know something. But now, young people, nothing is what it is. You don't know.
Right.
It's just like something. So without pestering them too badly, I'm trying to help my grandchildren learn to relate experiences using appropriate words like he thought, he said, I imagined, I considered, rather than he was like, and they were like, and it was like, and we were all like. So I think that as adults, we do benefit from being a little more conscious and intentional about how we speak around children, because they will imitate us exactly as it is. So
speaking is so important. You and I actually, I think it was back in maybe March or April, we were both judging at an NCFCA. That's what it was, right? Tournament here in Tulsa. And it is absolutely fascinating to watch these kids. And the thing that I noticed most about them is the confidence that they have just in themselves. And people talk about weird and socialized homeschoolers. These were all homeschooled kids who are they're confident. And you can tell it in the way that they stand, in the way that they present themselves, and the eye contact, because they learn all of those things. They learn to make eye contact. They learn to use gestures appropriately. It's just amazing to watch these kids and see, and you can look at them and say, they're going to do well as adults.
Yeah.
Because they have been taught to think well, to speak well, to communicate well, to do all of these things that most adults don't know how to do. And so you're right. I mean, whether they're a stay-at-home mom who's encouraging other stay-at-home moms, or an engineer who's going up on stage and talking to other engineers about whatever product they're engineering. I mean, there are so many different benefits to being able to
I've never met a kid who did speech and debate in high school and wouldn't say that was the best or one of the most important things from my childhood. So I would encourage everyone to look into that. NCFCA.org is...
Well, and I know IEW has some products as well.
Introduction to Public Speaking, excellent 12-week course, video. It teaches... so many of the good fundamentals that would be useful for really anyone.
Right.
But the target is your teenager audience.
Right. Well, we'll put links to that in the show notes again as well. Andrew, thank you so much for being with us 2 weeks in a row.
Hey, it's been great. Thank you.
This has been so much fun. I love having you in the studio with me in person. Rarely do I get to actually sit face-to-face with a guest and get to record this way. So it's been a lot of fun. And thank you for what you do for the homeschooling community. I know you've been around it for a long time, and you have been such an encouragement and really instrumental in helping homeschool families to be able to homeschool with excellence and with confidence, because it's scary. It's scary for any homeschool mom to jump in there and say, I'm going to teach my kids at home, because we've been brainwashed to believe that it can only be done by the quote unquote experts in the school system. And so thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what IEW has done in your team. You guys do amazing work. And
thanks to you and Garrett as well, because you've got a lot of people to understand, hey, the water's fine.
Yes.
Come on in.
Yes. Yeah. It's amazing. So thank you guys so much for listening. You are such a blessing to us. Let us know if there's any way that we can be a blessing to you. Just send us an email, podcast@schoolhouserocked.com. And if you would just continue to pray for the ministry, we've got lots of big changes coming up, and we're excited to talk with you about those. But pray for us, and we've got some big announcements coming up. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you back here on Monday. Stay tuned to the very end to hear what's coming up next. Talk to you then. Bye.
You're listening to the Biblical Family Network. Hey, I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And we're the co-hosts of the Culture Proof podcast. We want to invite you to join us every week as we discuss what's happening in the world and then filter those happenings through a decidedly biblical lens.
There are many questions, especially when we see what's happening in our culture today, but the answers are found within the Word of God. So that's where we want to look.
Amen. When we resist those cultural trends that rival the truth,
we remain culture proof.
Beyond agreement as to what the individual words stand for, there really isn't a clear and concise definition for what STEM actually is. It's kind of like a buzzword. It means different things to different people. Some companies sell project kits labeled STEM all over them, where you take something like a water bottle and you use cardboard and construction paper and markers and glue and tape and you turn it into a rocket. Well, we're studying space. It's a rocket. It must be STEM. Well, honestly, no, it's a craft project. Now, if you take that water bottle and you find some way to launch it and then see how far or how high it travels, or maybe you take a fan and you build a little mini wind tunnel and you stick your water bottle rocket inside and you see what kind of aerodynamic properties it has, now you're getting to a STEM project.